In a world torn apart by war, distance, and time, some love stories were never meant to survive. And yet they did. From Vietnam to Thailand, from Japan to America, across decades of silence and oceans of longing, 5 couples found each other again, against all odds. These are the top 5 lost love reunions. Stories of promises broken, letters lost, tears shed, and second chances that came 40, 50, even 70 years later. Stay with us as we journey through 5 of the most emotional reunions ever told. The American veteran and the Vietnamese girl, a love story across oceans and decades. In 1969, the war in Vietnam was a cauldron of chaos, smoke, and sorrow. But amid the whir of helicopter blades and the distant crack of gunfire, a quiet, fragile love bloomed between 2 young souls who should have never met, yet did. Lieutenant junior grade John Dickinson arrived in Saigon that year, a fresh-faced graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, recently trained to fly helicopters in Pensacola. The moment his boots touched the sweltering tarmac of Tan Son Nhut Airport, the foreign air, thick, humid, and tinged with unfamiliar spices, told him that his world had shifted. Assigned to Helicopter Attack Light Squadron 3, famously known as the Sea Wolves, Dickinson was thrust into a unit that had one mission: support and save lives in the swamps and rivers of Vietnam's Deep South. Stationed at Binh Thuy and later Song Ong Doc, he and his fellow crew members flew their Hueys low and fast, each armed with mini Gatling guns, rocket pods, and twin Fort Caliber machine guns. Their job was perilous, responding to urgent calls from ground forces besieged by Viet Cong or North Vietnamese Army units. It was in one of his brief respites, away from the rotor blades and the danger, that John met her. At the American Officers Club at MACV headquarters in Cà Mau, he saw Ngoc Ha for the first time. She was just 18, working as a hostess, her presence as graceful as a song amid a storm. She was bright, warm, and effortlessly captivating. Their connection was instant, a spark that defied the dust and din of war. They laughed, exchanged stories, and soon, letters. In the heart of conflict, where death was an everyday companion, their affection became a delicate refuge, a tender rebellion against the surrounding brutality. But war has little patience for love. Soon, John was deployed deeper into the Mekong Delta, to a remote outpost where the perimeter was secured by little more than a few local militiamen crouching in foxholes. His nights were often spent sitting on the porch of his hooch, gazing into the inky blackness, wondering why the enemy hadn't yet overrun their fragile camp. The war didn't just demand bravery, it demanded sacrifice. One mission still burned in John's memory. Returning from an air patrol, one of their helicopters was struck by enemy fire and forced down in an open field, surrounded immediately by hostile forces. Circling above, Dickinson and his crew offered covering fire, the air thick with bullets and smoke. A rescue seemed impossible, yet hours later, miraculously, an Army helicopter managed to extract the stranded crew. The relief of seeing their brothers in arms return safely was a rare taste of victory in a war where loss often claimed the headlines. Eventually, the time came for John to return home. Before he left, he promised Ngoc Ha they'd stay in touch, to write until the seas and miles between them could be crossed. What he didn't know was that she was carrying his child, a secret unknown even to her until after he was gone. Their letters, tragically, were thwarted by the chaos of war. Few reached their destination. The distance between them grew insurmountable. 9 months later, Ngoc Ha gave birth to their son, Min, a living echo of a love interrupted by history's cruel hand. Then the world shifted again. Vietnam fell to the communists. The country was engulfed in yet another wave of pain, retribution, and repression. Ngoc Ha, marked by her past connection to the Americans and from a family of means, was imprisoned. She had since married a South Vietnamese officer, with whom she had 2 more children, but her husband, too, was imprisoned, and he soon disappeared from her life altogether. Emerging from captivity, Ngoc Ha was determined to escape the land that had shackled her, but Vietnam, by then, was a trap. She tried 4 times to flee, each attempt ending in heartbreak. It wasn't until 1982, with help from a German refugee agency, that she and her children boarded a freighter and made it to Munich, Germany. She had escaped the prison of her country, but not the memory of her first love. She never forgot John. Across continents and decades, the search for a lost love. In Munich, Ngakha rebuilt her life among strangers in a foreign land, but the name John Dickinson remained engraved in her heart. She knew he was from Minneapolis. She had his name, that was all. Time had reshaped their worlds, but not their bond. Determined to find the man who had once promised her forever, Ngakha asked an American friend in Germany to help her search. It was an almost impossible task in a pre-internet world. The friend returned to the United States with only a name and a city, a needle in a haystack. But fate, once cruel, decided to show mercy. The friend picked up a Minneapolis phone book, flipped through the endless pages of Dickinson's, and began calling. The third number he dialed was John's. "Have you ever known a woman in Vietnam named Ngakha?" the voice asked. John's heart must have stopped. After 20 years, the memories rushed back. The officers' club, the delicate touch of her hand, the quiet smiles shared amidst a war. In that moment, the past and present collided. They spoke, they remembered, and they reconnected. Their love had been in hibernation, not dead. 2 years later, in 1992, John and Ngakha were married. The woman he thought he had lost forever was now by his side once more. But she wasn't alone. She brought with her 4 children, each carrying stories of resilience, survival, and hope. Their eldest son, Min, John's son, was already grown, having spent his formative years without ever knowing his American father. Now in the United States, Min embraced his heritage and set down his own roots. Today, he lives in San Antonio, Texas, where he owns a concrete business and runs a mobile food cart selling Vietnamese cuisine, a bridge between 2 worlds. Married with 3 children, Min proudly watches his daughters attend Texas A&M University, while his son journeys through high school. Ngakha's other children flourished too. Kai, her second son, graduated from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and now works for an international law firm while finishing his master's degree in business. Dukan, the youngest daughter, is carving her path in college, aspiring to be a dentist. Lynn, the eldest daughter, chose service, proudly wearing the uniform of the U.S. Air Force as a sergeant. John's family was no longer just a reflection of the love he had lost and found. It was a living testament to endurance, destiny, and the will to survive. Healing, homecoming, and the echoes of war. After Vietnam, John Dickinson stayed in the Navy for 4 more years before deciding to chart a new course. The horrors of war, the ache of separation, and the wonder of rediscovered love had shaped him, but he still had dreams of his own. He returned to school, earning a degree in studio art from the University of Minnesota. His creativity found purpose in public service when he joined the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Department. For nearly 30 years, John dedicated himself to cultivating beauty, culture, and design for the city, eventually leading a program that merged public space with cultural arts. In 2007, he and Ngakha retired to Port Charlotte, Florida, trading the cold winters of Minneapolis for warmer shores. There, they lived a quieter life, far from the gunfire of the Mekong Delta and the shadows of war. But the echoes never truly fade. Sometimes John would reflect on those nights spent staring into the blackness beyond his hooch, listening to the soft hum of the jungle, the distant danger always near. He remembered the friends who never made it back, the outpost overrun just days after he left, the unanswered question of who survived and who didn't. Vietnam had taken much, but it had also given him a story of improbable love. That story now lives on in his children, his grandchildren, and the quiet, steadfast love of a woman he thought lost, but who found her way back to him across oceans, wars, and decades. Their journey is not just one of reunion. It is a testament to the resilience of the human heart, the persistence of memory, and the belief that even amid the wreckage of war, love can endure. In the end, theirs is not just a war story. It is a love story, the kind that reminds us that no distance is too great, no time too long, for hearts that are meant to find each other again. Beautiful love story between former U.S. diplomat and Vietnamese girl. In the quiet rituals of daily life, the love between David Brown, a former U.S. diplomat, and his wife, Tuyet Le Brown, a Vietnamese woman known affectionately as Bác Tuyet, shines like the soft glow of a lunar New Year lantern. Nearly 50 years ago, their story began on the tarmac of Tan Son Nhat Airport, and ever since their lives have been intertwined by love, culture, and a shared devotion to Vietnam. Their home in Fresno hums with a harmonious blend of East and West. As Ted approaches, it is David, now a connoisseur of fish sauce and Vietnamese customs, who runs errands and tends to traditions with joy. Tuyet, with laughter in her voice, teases him for his love of all things Vietnamese, even claiming he loves Vietnam more than I do. What began as a cross-cultural connection has grown into a marriage rooted in mutual respect, tenderness, and shared purpose. Together they've built not only a family, but a bridge between two worlds, proving that love, when nurtured with understanding and devotion, can thrive beyond borders. From war zones to whispered confessions, a love against odds. In 1965, David Brown was only 22, a fresh-faced Foreign Service officer with the U.S. State Department, sent to Vietnam as the war intensified. As the tropical heat pressed against his skin, he realized how little he knew despite a year of Vietnamese language training. The tonal complexities of Sac, Huyen, Hoi, Nga, and Nang still eluded his tongue, and his American-accented Vietnamese was worlds apart from the locals. But David was determined. To succeed in Vietnam, fluency in both language and culture was essential, not just for diplomacy, but for connection. As part of the political section, he needed to navigate delicate relationships, understanding who held power, who could be trusted, and how to blend in. By 1967, fewer than 30 American State Department officers were stationed in Vietnam. David, along with a handful of young bachelors, was assigned to the provinces to expand American reach. His station, Bien Hoa, at the USAID headquarters, an assignment that would shape the rest of his life. There, among telephone lines and administrative paperwork, stood a 17-year-old Vietnamese girl named Tuyet, who had fibbed her age as 18 to land a job as a switchboard operator. Her eyes first caught the tall, blue-eyed American who, unlike the others, spoke Vietnamese, not perfectly but impressively. "I was just a kid," Tuyet remembered fondly, "but I noticed him, his eyes, his height, and the way he spoke our language." One evening, after both had worked late, David dared to offer her a ride home on his motorbike. Hesitantly, she accepted. That ride was meant to be just a convenience, but life had other plans, yet the journey wasn't smooth. Tuyet laughed when recalling their first cultural collision. "On the way home, he casually touched my thigh. I was shocked, furious, and scared. I slapped his hand away." David was stunned. His training in Vietnamese culture had prepared him for diplomacy, but not for the social intricacies of courting a Vietnamese woman. He apologized profusely, bewildered by her reaction. It was his first lesson in the depth of Vietnamese decorum and the sacred boundaries that shaped gender interactions. Another lesson soon followed. Tuyet's family, especially her father, was adamantly against their courtship. David had assumed that being an American diplomat, young, educated, and well-paid, would be enough to gain approval. But love, in Vietnamese culture, was bound by far more than status. For months, every weekend, David visited Tuyet's family home, engaging her father in long conversations about Vietnamese politics, anything to earn his respect. His heart leapt at mere glimpses of Tuyet as she shyly brought tea or water. Eventually, the barrier began to erode. He was permitted to take Tuyet on private outings, though they were always chaperoned by her younger brother, until the couple learned to bribe him for a few moments of privacy. Her father's final decree came with 3 conditions. David must propose to Tuyet following Vietnamese customs. He must convert to Catholicism, her faith. All their future children must be raised Catholic. David agreed to them all. Love had rooted itself too deeply to be swayed by doctrine or ritual. They married in June 1969, just before David's reassignment back to the United States. Their union was a bold declaration in a time and place where mixed-race marriages faced skepticism and scorn. But for David and Tuyet, love was not just romance. It was persistence, learning, and the courage to bridge worlds. The quiet strength of a life shared. Marriage brought them new joys, but also new battles, especially over money. Like many immigrant wives, Tuyet felt a pull of duty to support family back in Vietnam. David, raised in the individualistic ethos of the West, struggled to understand. "We argued constantly about sending money home," David admitted. "I thought it wasn't rational. We had our own life to build." Yet Tuyet never wavered. Without complaint, she found work selling men's clothing, then fabric. She earned accolades, like the customer service pin she received, proof that she carried the same tenacity abroad that had guided her at home. Her quiet perseverance, her refusal to burden him with her responsibilities, softened David's resistance. One day, perhaps without fully realizing it, he began to help, contributing, understanding, empathizing. Looking at her now, David speaks with a tenderness that time has only deepened. Tuyet is the most remarkable Vietnamese woman I've ever met. Smart, spirited, stubborn in the best ways. Life never defeated her. She raised our kids, managed the responsibilities of a diplomat's wife, and still went back to school to get a master's in mental health. He pauses, as if making a confession not just to me, but to her. "Sometimes I remind myself how lucky I am. Tuyet didn't marry me because I was a rich American. She married me because of love." Together, they raised 2 daughters. One graduated from Harvard, the other from Brown University. They now have a grandson and a home filled with books, Vietnamese memorabilia, and the gentle rituals of a cross-cultural life. In Fresno, David assists with cooking, gardening, and grocery shopping, especially for authentic Vietnamese ingredients like fish sauce. When it comes to Tet, his favorite dishes are Thit Co, pickled vegetables, and Ban Tet, never Ban Chung. He laughs. "Of course, it's because I married a southern Vietnamese woman." Tuyet chuckles, watching her husband with eyes full of love and quiet pride, the kind of gaze only half a century together can create. Their story isn't just one of marriage, it's a testament to patience, resilience, and the power of crossing borders. Not just geographically, but emotionally. It is a love that, like a well-seasoned Thitco, has simmered over time, enriched by every challenge, every compromise, every shared victory. And perhaps that is why, every year as Tet approaches, when David Brown hurries to the market for that extra bottle of fish sauce, it isn't just an errand. It's an act of devotion, a simple echo of a journey that began nearly 60 years ago on a motorbike ride home under the Saigon sky. Lost love reunited after 45 years, U.S. veteran finds his first love in Vietnam. The room was silent, but inside his chest, a storm brewed. Jim Reichel sat alone in a modest hotel in southern Vietnam, 8,500 miles from his Minnesota home. The walls were plain, the fan hummed low, but Jim couldn't stay still. He stood up, sat down, stood again. In his hand was a photograph, creased, faded, soft from the years. It showed a young Vietnamese woman standing on a balcony, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on something, or someone, disappearing down the road. That someone had been Jim, and now, after 45 years, he was back. "I'm getting a bit excited," he murmured, more to himself than anyone. "Geez, I haven't seen her in 45 years. The years had not been kind to his knees, stiff from arthritis and time, but the real weight he carried wasn't physical. It was emotional, a wound that had never closed, a door he had shut in 1970 and never had the courage to reopen, until now. Then, a soft knock. It was hesitant, barely there, but it thundered in his heart. He opened the door, and there she was, Nguyen Thi Han, the woman who, half a century ago, had whispered to him that she was pregnant, the woman he hadn't believed, the woman he hadn't said goodbye to, the woman who never left his heart. Her hair was gray now, her posture more delicate, but the moment their eyes met, it was like time collapsed. The years fell away, and for a heartbeat, they were back in 1970, young, unsure, and deeply in love in a country tearing itself apart. Jim, once a 21-year-old Air Force sergeant stationed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base near Saigon, had fallen for a bar hostess he knew only as Lin Hoa. It wasn't her real name, but that never mattered. What mattered was how she made him feel in a place where most things felt uncertain and foreign. Their days were simple: a $5 a month apartment, a black and white television, Beatles records playing softly while the world outside raged with war. They made love in the dim light of a shared fan and shared dreams, though those dreams were never fully aligned. She asked me to stay, Jim would later say. She wanted me to live in Vietnam with her. I was too young, too scared. I told her I couldn't. And then, he left. No goodbye. Just a snapshot taken through the dusty window of a departing taxi. He went home, became a government cartographer, got married, twice. He had a son. He battled Agent Orange-related health issues. Life moved forward, but part of him remained on that balcony, in that war-torn city, in the gaze of a woman he had walked away from. Around 2005, following his second divorce, the past began calling louder. He started searching. For her, for answers, for redemption. The girl on the balcony. She had been just 19 when he left. After Jim shipped out of Saigon, Nguyen Thi Han was devastated. Pregnant and alone, she fled the city and found refuge in the countryside. On December 18, 1970, she gave birth to a baby girl with pale skin and large, searching eyes. She named her daughter Nguyen Than Nguyen Thuy. Her name meant first tear. Because I was alone, Han said, and I had no one with me when she came into the world. Han believed she would be able to raise her child, but poverty and social stigma loomed. She entrusted her daughter to a friend who promised to take the baby to an orphanage, a place Han could still visit her, but days turned to weeks, and her friend never returned. When Han finally made her way to the orphanage, the nuns shook their heads. No child by that name, no record of the mother, no trace. It was as though her daughter had vanished. Heartbroken, Han joined the South Vietnamese army. After the fall of Saigon in 1975, she was imprisoned in a communist re-education camp. It was there she met the man who would become her husband. He was kind, quiet, and broken in his own ways. They married, had 2 children, and built a life out of the ashes of war. But she never stopped looking for her daughter, and she never forgave Jim. I was still angry with him, she admitted. He didn't believe me. He left me alone. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Jim was piecing together fragments. He only had a nickname, Lin Hoa, and the photograph. He connected with Father Founded, a volunteer group that helps reunite American veterans with the Vietnamese women and children left behind. Since 2012, he had traveled to Vietnam 5 times, searching through streets that had changed, neighborhoods that no longer remembered him, and people who had never heard of Lin Hoa. One of his ads read, "I am in search of you. It has been many years. I am not looking for a relationship. I want you to know that. I just would like to talk with the wonderful lady I knew in 1969 and 1970. Nothing came of it. Until one ordinary day in September, in the quiet village of Mai Luang in the Mekong Delta, Han sat beside her husband, now bedridden after a stroke. She was browsing news on her iPad when she opened an article about children abandoned during the war. And then she froze. There, buried deep in the article, was a black and white photo. Her photo. The photo Jim had taken all those years ago, the last time he saw her. There she was, in the arms of a young man in khaki uniform, her younger self staring back at her like a ghost. "The moment I saw it, I knew," she said. Suddenly, the memories of first love came rushing back. And with it, the pain, the child, the unanswered questions, the anger. But still, she reached out. She contacted the journalist who had written the article, and through them, she was reconnected with Jim. A reunion of tears and time. Their conversations began cautiously. Texts, phone calls, then Skype. There was awkwardness, there was emotion, but mostly there was the unmistakable hum of something unfinished, something deeper than mere nostalgia. When they finally agreed to meet, Jim boarded a plane for Vietnam once more. This time, his heart was heavier but clearer. He wasn't just looking for closure, he was hoping to help Han find their daughter. When she opened the door to greet him, her eyes filled with tears. "Nice to meet you. Again," Jim said softly, extending his arms. Han stepped into the embrace, sobbing. Later, seated side by side for an interview, they spoke quietly. Jim, his hair now white, rested his hand gently on the back of her chair. He didn't presume closeness. He simply wanted to be near, to offer comfort without taking more than he'd already taken. Together, they remembered the music, the apartment, the fear, the morning she told him about the pregnancy, the disbelief in his eyes, the heartbreak in hers. They cried not only for what had happened, but for what never had the chance to happen. They submitted a DNA kit. Somewhere out there, a woman in her 40s might still be searching, might be wondering, might be waiting. Their daughter, the girl named after a tear. "It's a lie to say I'm calm and carefree," Han said. "I have mixed feelings. I'm happy with my life now. But my one unfulfilled dream is to find my first daughter." Jim nodded, eyes misty. "This isn't about romance. It's about truth. It's about making something right before it's too late." Their story is not one of fairy tale endings. It is one of war, silence, pain, and the long shadows of choices made too young. But it is also a story of courage, of two people brave enough to face the past and meet it with humility, with honesty, and with hope. Some doors wait a lifetime. In another timeline, they may have raised a family together in a quiet home with music playing and their daughter laughing in the next room. But history had other plans. Still, the door that Jim once feared he'd never be able to knock on again opened. What was behind it wasn't just an old love, but a shared mission. A search for a daughter lost in the fog of war and silence. There is no guarantee they'll find her, but they are looking, together. Because some wounds are too deep to ignore, some truths demand to be found, and some hearts, no matter how broken, still carry the capacity for healing. Their journey is not over. Not until they find the girl with the large eyes and the name that meant first tear, and not until they tell her the truth, that she was never forgotten. American soldier, Vietnamese girl find lost love after 50 years. "I am excited and nervous," said Lan, 67 years young. She was about to meet someone she'd loved 50 years ago. It was almost 10 p.m. when she reached Ho Chi Minh City's Tan Son Nhat International Airport with her family. September 12th was going to be a day to remember. While the family members waited at the arrival gate, Lan insisted on standing at Pillar 12, the rendezvous for Lan and Ken Reesing, an American soldier she'd fallen in love with a lifetime ago. An hour after the flight landed, the veteran did not show up. The tension was almost unbearable for Lan. Eventually, he came into view, in a green shirt similar to the one he'd worn in a picture taken 50 years ago. He immediately looked for Pillar 12. After an 8,800-mile journey from Ohio, the 71-year-old man was tired, but smiled when he saw Lan, who was wearing an ao dai, the traditional Vietnamese dress. Seeing Ken walk towards her with a bunch of roses, Lan held out her arms. They both burst into tears. The couple spent a few minutes hugging each other. "The first thing I said to her was sorry. I could not keep my promise to come back earlier," Ken said. "I am wearing this shirt because it looks like the one I wore in the photo, so she could recognize me." Ken was visiting Vietnam for only the second time. He had first visited it in 1969, when the Vietnam War was raging. He was 22. war, and love. Then, he would usually walk to EM Club, Enlisted Men's Club, to drink and listen to music in the evening. One day, he saw Lan, a bar hostess, and fell for her at first sight. And among the myriad of American men seeking her attention, she chose Ken. They quickly became an item. Since 17-year-old Lan was not allowed to enter the military area, they met every weekend. Ken reminisced, "I never met anyone like her. Her black hair, fair skin, and beautiful smile, they were more attractive than anything I could imagine." When Ken was told he would leave Vietnam in September 1969, he asked Lan if she wanted to go to the US with him, but she refused. She did not want to leave her family. He says, "I thought our situation would have been different if she had agreed to go with me. Then I hoped it would not be too long before we reunited." One day before he left Vietnam, the two went to a post office, bought 50 envelopes, and put them in a box. He told her that when he got the 50th letter from her, he would return to Vietnam. He thought it would take her a year to write the 50 letters, but it took her less than 3 months. And then she kept writing. But Ken could not come back as promised, and in 1973, they lost touch. When the war was over, Ken wrote several letters to the EM Club and Long Binh Post, but received no reply because those places had been closed, and all the letters he had sent earlier were later burnt by Lan's family. "I failed to keep my words. It broke my heart. I was so stupid," Ken said. But even after losing touch in 1973, he could not stop thinking about Lan. Inside him was a glimmer of hope that she would survive the war. Later, the veteran just wanted to know if Lan was still alive and safe. He had always regretted not asking for more detailed information when they were dating in 1969. He was not even sure what her full name was. He only knew she was a native of Long Binh province. After 2000, with the internet gaining popularity, Ken hired international detective agencies to find his first love, but he did not succeed. He had also enlisted the help of a man living in Bien Hoa who went to Long Binh several times in 2 years. Ken wanted to find Lan secretly because he did not want to disturb her personal life, but the discovery was not fated to happen until June 2019. Robert Frank, a man living in Ho Chi Minh City, approached Reesing after learning that he was looking for a Vietnamese woman. Reesing agreed to send Frank some photos of Lan he had. Frank posted the information on social networks and found Lan within a day. Both Ken and Lan were confused at first, but when they spoke with each other, the memories of their love came flooding back. Lan says she had never used a smartphone before until they started calling each other daily. "It took me a few days to get used to speaking in English with him on the phone," she says. "I had not spoken English for long." Ken told her that he wanted to visit Vietnam. "I did not want him to come to Vietnam alone. It is too far. I have a sister in the US and she will come to see me during the Lunar New Year festival. I told him to delay the plan until then so he can travel with my sister." Lan says, "But he did not listen to me. He wanted to come." Lost love found after 70 years, a veteran's emotional reunion. The wind moved slowly across the fields of Woodbine, Iowa, bending the tall grasses as if bowing to a truth older than memory. Inside a modest farmhouse, a 91-year-old man sat quietly at his kitchen table, staring at a stack of worn photographs he had carried for nearly 7 decades. The corners were frayed, the images faded, yet the woman's face remained as clear as the first time he had seen her. Her name was Peggy Yamaguchi. For most of his life, Dwayne Mann had been known as a father, a grandfather, a veteran, but deep inside, beyond the medals and the years, he was still a 22-year-old sailor who had once fallen in love in post-war Japan. It was 1954, and the world, though scarred by conflict, was slowly piecing itself back together. Yokosuka, a bustling port city south of Tokyo, had become a place where young Americans like Dwayne lived suspended between two worlds, the duty of their uniforms and the fleeting joys of youth. It was there, one evening, that Dwayne wandered into a dance hall. The room was alive with music, trumpets, saxophones, the heartbeat of a post-war generation trying to forget the pain of the past. Cigarette smoke curled toward the ceiling as couples spun across the floor, and then he saw her. Peggy worked as a hat check girl. She was delicate yet strong, with a smile that seemed to soften the noise around her. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Dwayne asked her for a dance. What followed was not just a waltz or a swing. It was an unspoken recognition. Their steps aligned perfectly, as though destiny had been rehearsing them for this very moment. Onlookers noticed. People paused. Two young strangers from two very different worlds moved together as if bound by a hidden rhythm. From that night onward, they were inseparable. They walked hand in hand along Yokosuka's narrow streets, shared whispered dreams beneath paper lanterns, and found joy in simple things. A bowl of noodles, a stolen kiss, the warmth of a quiet evening. Peggy carried his child, and in those tender months, the future seemed certain. Dwayne promised her they would marry. He would send for her once he returned home. They would raise their child together, build a life woven from both American soil and Japanese grace, but history is often cruelest in its timing. Orders came abruptly. Dwayne was to return to the United States. The news struck like a lightning bolt. There was no time to marry, no way to secure her passage. All he could do was hold her close and whisper a promise. "Don't be afraid. When I get home, I will send for you." Peggy believed him. He believed himself. And yet, the tide of fate had already begun to pull them apart. When Dwayne stepped back onto American soil, he expected to work, save, and bring Peggy to Iowa. Instead, he was met with two devastating truths. His father had spent all of his savings, and worse still, his mother, consumed by prejudice, had burned the letters Peggy sent from Japan. Each day he waited for her words. Each day he received nothing. And then finally, one letter slipped through the flames. In it, Peggy told him she had lost their baby. With no other choice, she had married another man. For Dwayne, the world went quiet. "It was over," he later recalled. "That set in the idea that I abandoned her. It just wore me out. That's not an honorable thing to do." For nearly 70 years, that guilt became the shadow at his side. Every family photo, every quiet evening, carried with it the ghost of a love unfinished. He never stopped wondering if Peggy believed he had betrayed her. He never stopped wondering if she knew how deeply he had loved her. And in his wallet, pressed close to his heart, he kept her photographs, a fragile reminder of the young sailor and the girl who had once danced until the world disappeared. The search across decades' time, they say, heals all wounds. But for Dwayne, time did not heal. It only deepened the ache. Each year added another layer of silence, another layer of questions unanswered. By the time he turned 91, the weight was unbearable. He no longer dreamed of rekindled romance, he simply longed for closure. He needed Peggy to know the truth, that he had never abandoned her, that he had fought against circumstances far beyond his control. So, in 2022, Dwayne did something extraordinary. He told his story to the world. KETV Newswatch 7, a local television station in Nebraska, aired his plea. In the broadcast, his voice trembled as he held up Peggy's photographs. He spoke of their dancing, their love, their promises. He confessed the guilt that had haunted him for a lifetime, and then he asked for help. The story spread like wildfire. Newspapers, television channels, and social media carried the tale of a veteran searching for his lost Japanese love. Messages poured in. People in the United States, Japan, and beyond scoured records, hoping to help. Among them was Teresa Wong, a 23-year-old Canadian researcher for the History Channel. She was touched by the purity of Dwayne's search. Using her skills, she dug into archives, tracing every possible lead. And then she found it. A 1956 article in the Daily Press, a Michigan newspaper, caught her eye. The headline read, "Tokyo Bride Likes Life in Escanaba." The article described a Japanese woman who had married an American and settled in the small town of Escanaba. Her name was Peggy Yamaguchi. Teresa's heart raced. Could it be her? As it turned out, Peggy had been in America all along. not across an ocean, but just a few states away. She had raised 3 sons with her husband in Michigan, living a quiet, ordinary life, while Dwayne had spent decades believing she was lost to him forever. Reporter Michelle Bander soon contacted Peggy's family. When her son Rich showed Peggy the video of Dwayne's search, her eyes filled with recognition. "I remember him," she exclaimed. "He really loved me, you know." Her children were stunned. The past had suddenly become alive before them. Another son, Mike, discovered the truth behind his own name. His middle name was Dwayne, chosen because of the man his mother had once loved in Japan. The realization struck everyone with force. 2 lives, separated by silence and lies, had been living parallel for 70 years. And now, finally, they were about to meet again. The reunion that healed. 2 hearts. The air was heavy with anticipation as Dwayne stepped into the modest Michigan room. His heart pounded, his palms trembled. 70 years of guilt, love, and longing condensed into a single instant. Then the door opened. "Peggy!" he cried out, his voice breaking with recognition. There she was. Aged, yes, but still the same woman who had once lit up a Yokosuka dance hall with her smile. For a moment, time itself seemed to falter. They moved toward each other, their frail arms reaching, and then they embraced. Peggy's hand lingered on his back as tears rolled down his cheeks. 2 souls, bound by love and separated by history, were finally reunited. "Remember that dancing?" Peggy asked softly. "Oh yeah," Dwayne laughed through his tears. They sat together, the past unfolding between them like a faded photograph coming back into focus. Dwayne pulled out the pictures he had carried for 70 years. His hands shook as he placed them in hers. "I've thought about this all my life," he told her. "I worried that you thought I abandoned you." "I'm here to tell you I didn't abandon you at all. I just couldn't find you." Peggy's eyes filled with compassion. She touched the photos gently, then looked at him with the kindness he had remembered for so long. "You saved all the pictures," she said. "You must have loved me." "I did," Dwayne whispered. In that moment, the burden of a lifetime lifted. Peggy reassured him that she had never felt abandoned. She had lived her life, raised her children, and carried her own share of memories. But now, seeing him again, she understood the truth he had carried in silence for so long. For Dwayne, it was liberation. "This has really been a freeing experience for me," he said, his voice steady now, his spirit unburdened. Their reunion was not about rekindling lost romance. It was about forgiveness, closure, and the quiet beauty of 2 hearts finding peace. Theirs was a love story not defined by the years they had together, but by the endurance of memory and the healing power of truth. As Dwayne and Peggy sat together, surrounded by family, the decades of separation seemed less important than the simple fact that they had found each other again. What mattered was not the dances they missed, the letters burned, or the years stolen, but the embrace they finally shared, and the words that had waited a lifetime to be spoken. This is not just a story of lost love, it is a story of humanity, a story of how prejudice and circumstance can tear lives apart, but also of how resilience and hope can weave them back together. Dwayne Mann and Peggy Yamaguchi remind us that love, once planted, never truly dies. It lingers in photographs, in names passed to children, in the silent ache of memory. And sometimes, if we are lucky, it finds its way home, even 70 years later.